I have had the privilege of speaking last year in Washington. Anybody in Washington last year? Okay, so you might have been at my lecture, I'm not sure. It's going to be similar, but then I'm going to move on a little bit from there. And out of respect for those who came before us, I wore this tie, which has the Mercury capsule, it has the Apollo command module, it has a shuttle and a man standing on the moon. Those people dedicated their lives, and some of them gave up their lives. So I wanted to give them respect. So my presentation is onto Mars, and it's a little bit of a play on words, onto Mars and then onto the surface. So this is the comparison of size of Earth to Mars. That's a very good comparison. This is my biography. I have nothing to disclose. I'm not connected to any organization, government or otherwise. Just my personal desire. I've been trained in medicine. I actually went to Houston in 1980 to become to apply as an astronaut. And what happened is I have scoliosis, so I didn't pass the physical. But they've gotten a lot more understanding about physical situations since then, but it was quite strict in those days. So my goal is, as other people here, like Dr. Zubrin, is to see human mission to Mars within 10 years. This is a little thing about, there was a place called Mars in Pennsylvania. It's a little town, and NASA goes there every New Year, Mars New Year, and they actually had a last celebration. They had one coming up too. So the thing is that this is actually probably the most important lecture you're going to be at in this whole conference. And you're going to say, well, that's kind of bold of you to say that. But the situation is this. Let's think about this now. If you bought a vehicle, SUV, bought a home, probably got a mortgage, school, bachelor's degree, whatever, what's the bottom line that you needed to get that? Money, right? If you didn't have the money, you have nothing, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about, is money, okay? So I do want to do is pay tribute to those who pioneered human spaceflight before us. Yuri Gagarin, a little story about him that most people don't know. That was during the era of the Soviets, where there was a lot of secrecy going on. They wanted to beat out the Americans. They didn't have a rocket that was powerful enough to actually launch a big enough capsule for him to land on Earth with. So what happened is he had to parachute out on the way down and landed by parachute. And the craft crashed. A lot of people don't know this. It's quite amazing. He had a lot of courage because in those days the doctors thought that you couldn't swallow, you couldn't breathe when you were in space, so they felt he was going to die. And then on top of that, he parachutes down. It's pretty damn gutsy when you think about it. So they have a Yuri night every year on April 12th to celebrate him. And then there's Alan Shepard, who was quite upset. It's another little story about him, because the American intelligence at that time knew that the Soviets were about to beat us. And he tried to get them to launch him in March, because he knew that around a few weeks later or something, around that time, that they were going to launch the first Russian. So he tried to beat him out. And the Americans were a little kind of skittish about sending the first man up. They didn't even make it an orbital flight. They made a suborbital flight. Okay, so that's the background of those two. Despite what everybody thinks, the Germans did not develop the first liquid fuel rockets. Actually, it was Robert Goddard, who was American, and he launched, really interesting story about him too. He used to launch from Massachusetts until people complained because he was crashing the rockets near people's homes. So he ended up going out to, guess where, White Sands, of all places, and that's where he started launching his rockets at White Sands. So we go back to Alan Shepard, and right after his flight, President Kennedy, because of a lot of reasons, political pressure and all of that, wanted to beat the Russians. He made the bold statement about putting man on the moon by the end of the decade, okay? Not since Kennedy has any president ever made a statement like that. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. No one's ever been bold enough to not only make the statement, but then back it up by making sure that it was funded, okay? So that's why we're where we are today. We're not going to get there that way, but Sci-fi has given us a lot of inspiration. In fact, another little story, Arthur C. Clarke in 1945 proposed that if you put satellites in geostationary orbit, that you'd be able to cover the whole Earth with communication. So, big sci-fi guy, the one you might have heard about, 2001, The Space Odyssey, he was the one who wrote the book. So then we have the history of robotic missions, serious proposal for a human mission to Mars, and Dr. Robert Zubrin, who you know was sitting right here, in 1980s, working with NASA, and then in 1989, then I believe President Bush, the father, looked into the Space and Exploration Initiative, and people in NASA said, oh, we can put all these big toys and stuff together, and they include nuclear rockets, and they came up with an estimated cost of $450 billion over 20, 30 years. Obviously, it was never funded, and it was considered using new or not even proven technology, so that went nowhere. So Dr. Zubrin came up with a proposal in 1990, and that 1992 estimated cost was approximately $55 billion over 10 years. It's called Mars Direct. There's now a semi-direct that's also on the books, so it's kind of be direct and semi-direct. You might have heard this one, Mars One. They were came up with a proposal to do a one-way Mars missions where people would actually go and never come back and settle. There's no estimated cost. There was no formal breakdown or disclosure. The proposed funding was going to come from private corporations in a reality show format. I don't know, I mean, in all respect to the people involved, but I don't know if you'd want to be on a spacecraft that has, you know, fast food restaurant stickers on and all that stuff to maybe to pay for that, but that was their proposal. That sort of like went nowhere. I understand they don't have much in the way of funding. This is a little sense of humor here about that curiosity killed the cat. So just we should never brought Foofy to Mars. So okay. So now this is the type of different proposals: NASA funding and private citizen funding versus Mars One. Okay. So in 2015, I sat out in the audience. Dr. Zubrin was speaking, and I said to him, look, why are you fighting for 25 years with NASA? Why don't we fund this privately? And he took out his wall and he said, need money. So I went home that weekend after that conference and racked my brains about how are we going to find a way of privately funding this. And I woke up in the middle of the night and thought of this. So it was like one of those things from a movie. So if you wanted to go to, like, say, you go to somebody like Microsoft and these big corporations say, look, hey, do you have like $40-50 billion you would like to put up to send people to Mars? Very unlikely that they're going to do that. It's difficult for you to convince them to come up with maybe, I mean, XPrize, they put up like what, between $1 and $10 million for, am I correct? $1 to $10 million for the XPrizes, but that's a far cry from billions. Let's face it, if somebody in here, now they have big lotteries out here in California like to do, like, okay. So let's say that you won a lottery and you netted $100 million. Say, wow, I got $100 million. That's a lot of money. You can take care of you in next 2 or 3 generations. If you bought one rocket somewhere between $60 and $120 million, that's not counting the satellite. So your $100 million doesn't go far in the space industry, okay? So we're talking in the billions here. So my proposal is to think small, to think big. Example, you know, you heard about the doubling the penny to come out. So, and this is what I was talking about. Dr. Zubrin said it would cost about $40 billion over 10 years. So what I took, and I added 50% to his estimate because of things like, as you hear in the space industry all the time, about cost overruns, inflation, unforeseen setbacks, like a rocket that explodes. I broke it down, $60 billion, $6 billion a year for 10 years, which if you took 10 million people and they all put up $600, my 5th grade math tells you that's $6 billion, okay? Now, if you divide that $600 by 12 months, it comes to $50 a month per person, which is equivalent to 1 cup of coffee. So that's all it would take. And if you think 10 million people is a lot, there are 245 million adults in this country alone. Not children, adults. And that's not counting people in Europe, Asia, Australia, wherever you want to talk about, that might be interested in putting up money. By the way, my goal is to put up a 501c so that $600 is even tax deductible. So the whole thing is, it's not about me, it's about you. You can be the one that can make the change, okay? I already started a website, it's already up, it's in the preliminary stages. And this is something when we were doing the website, we found out the number of individuals that viewed various websites about Mars is over 400,000 per month, which is 4.8 million annually. So you see, 10 million people doesn't seem like a lot when you think about that. Even if those are the same, and there were they've got 2.5 million people right there that might put up $600 a year. Okay, so we're not talking about a lot of people. Okay, this is this 501c, which is about to be set up, similar to the 501c that Dr. Zubrin has at Mars Society. The website's already up, it's in the preliminary stages. So if you're interested in becoming part of history and fund a human mission to Mars, there will be an area on that website to send your name, email address, and phone numbers. And then what will happen after that will be, we'll probably have to get a board, a panel, who will decide where the best area is to start with. And I believe, if Dr. Zubrin will correct me on this, several millions, you said, for a state-of-the-art station to train, correct? So and that's not a lot of money we're talking, he could have a state-of-the-art, which I would think would be one of the first places to start. If you want to train people, you get the state-of-the-art everything. You could test out new spacesuits. You could test out equipment, habitats, all types of things. There are companies like Bigelow, who has already built habitats. He has a few in orbit, one's connected to the space station. People like that who you would get together. If you have the money, we would go to the people who are building these, and with the right people and the right brains together, this can be done. If not, 10 years from now, we're going to be standing here and we're going to be talking about NASA being funded. And there's nothing against anybody who works for NASA. None of us would be here if it wasn't for NASA, okay? Even Elon Musk will tell you that if it wasn't for NASA, he would be bankrupt, okay? So he was going under, and they gave him the first contract for his cargo launches, and that brought him right out from zero. So everybody here has something to thank NASA for. But it's just that it's bureaucracy, it's run by government, it's at the whim of Congress and every president that comes and goes. And 25 years later, we have nothing to show for it in terms of any real Mars mission. And they tell you that we have all these things planned for Mars, but they just made their budget out, and the way I understand it, there is not $1 of their budget this year that's going to anything to do with a manned mission. In fact, they're running out of money to decide to do after the 2020 Mars mission. They have no money allocated for another robotic mission from there on. So, and then, of course, paying tribute to everybody who puts up the money, names, maybe even videos of people to go to Mars on the crafts. So this is not easy, but thanks to new technology, it can be done. As Dr. Zubrin said, today we are much better prepared to go to Mars than we were in 1961 to go to the moon, and we did it in 8 years. I mean, we didn't even have a vehicle. We didn't have anybody trained. We had 15 minutes of flight time in space experience. That was it when President Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon. So we've come quite a long way from there. I want to thank NASA, as I said, Dr. Rob Zubrin for inviting me, Dr. Patricia Carwin, who helped me with some of the technical things, and Patrick Levy, who helped me with the website, and that he's helping. And I want to thank all of you for coming. And this is thank you in all languages. And any questions? Yes, sir.
There's one part I missed, the money part.
The money part.
Yeah, would you go over that again?
Okay. So you get 10 million people, and they put up 600. Now, granted, we'll take less than that and more than that. Yeah. But once the 501c is open and the account is open, you donate to it. It's a donation. It's not really, okay, so you can put up as much as you want, anywhere from $5 to 5,000 if you wanted to. And that money will go into an account, and then once we have enough in the account to do something substantial, then my idea would be to set up a board, anywhere from 5 to 7 people to decide.
Back to the money part.
Okay, what do you want to know exactly?
Has this been tried before?
Has this been tried before? Well, I think the Mars Society is all private money, isn't it?
Over 95%.
Yeah.
We occasionally come some money from NASA or Canadian Space Agency. 95% of our money is private. And about half of that comes in $50 or $100 donations from members, and half of that comes in occasional chunks of money from 10,000 to 100,000. So really sort of two distinct classes of money that you see. And they total to about the same amount each, with obviously much more of the small donations.
And Elon Musk, even though he started off with some government contracts, he did start, and he does put a lot of his own private money up too. Jeff Bezos is doing the same thing, so it's private funded money. So if you say, has it been done for you? Technically, yes. Sir?
I give a lot of money to open space charities.
Okay.
And the reason I do is that they've been around 40 years.
Now, what do you mean
And I
specifically?
trust- And what is it?
Like an example, I don't know what you mean by that.
Peninsula Open Space Trust of Northern California.
Okay.
As an example. But they've been around 40 years. And I know that they put my money to good use.
Right,
Because I trust them.
right,
And other than Robert Zubrin in the audience
Right.
and Elon Musk, I'm not sure that I have a lot of other people I can say I trust.
I agree with you.
with the money.
I agree with you. There's two answers I have for you. One is you don't have to put up a lot of money, and it's tax deductible and it's a small risk. And the other thing is that I would have a board, because I wouldn't even know what to do with some of the money, to be very frank. I would have to consult with people like Dr. Zubrin, people who are in the industry. People would say, this is the best use of your money for what you have right now. So I understand your reticence, and I think you have a good point.
No, what I'm saying is you've got to form a board that's really powerful.
Yes, I would like to get somebody in the space industry, somebody in finance, somebody in banking, somebody with good, obviously with good reputations, that would be someone that everybody would say, oh, they have impeccable reputations, that they can trust and say, I totally agree with you. Because I'm the first one to tell you that I wouldn't know what to do with the money. If you gave me $100 million in the bank to do something with it, I wouldn't know what to do with it. So I would have to consult with people who do know what to do with it. Yes, sir.
Basically, following up on that question is, you would also have to kind of guarantee to the donors that something is being done, so there has to be a part of that organization or something on the other side that executes on that plan.
Right, absolutely. In fact, everything has to be disclosed, just like.
Who would that be? Would that be Mars Society or?
Well, it depends. It depends if we do a direct affiliation with them or if we're keeping semi-independent. But either way, everything would be disclosed publicly, because once you have a 501c, everything has to be disclosed publicly. That's part of the law. You can't just keep it in your own personal accounts. That's one of the reasons for it.
I'm just wondering who would actually do the flying to Mars? Who would do that?
Who would go? You mean physically would go to Mars?
Do the project of spending those $60 billion.
Yeah, and I don't have an exact answer for you. That's why I would consult with people like Zubrin and others who would sit down and say, hey, look, we got this much money in the bank. What's the best use of that money right now? And that's what I would do, because we don't know the answer to that. Like, for instance, right now, not all the technology is already there. It is there, but it's not all there. So that's why you say 10 years, because you'd want to launch, say, Habitat. And then like you talked about InSight resource utilization. You send like he talked about, sending a craft to make fuel for a return trip from the atmosphere. All that be done before any people even go there. Yes?
What would you do for international money to bring them in, since tax deductible for them in the States does nothing?
You mean the tax deduction about their laws in their country, you mean?
Well,
Is
I
it-
mean, if as a Canadian citizen, if I donate money to you, that doesn't, I don't have U.S. taxes, so that does nothing to me.
You're absolutely right. I don't have an answer to that either, because I don't know. Only thing I can say is that you'll be a participant in the sense that your name will be in there, and maybe you'll want to get even more involved. I don't have a good answer to that, but that's a good point. It's an excellent point. Yes, sir.
When it comes to successful Kickstarters and crowdfunding campaigns, all the ones that I know that have been overly successful, it was just under the guise of donate this much, you could get your name on
Right.
a hard drive on the
Right.
pack or whatever.
Right.
So when it comes to something that would be so pie in the sky and would require 5 million different contributions, what's the physical draw that you can have an individual contributor look forward to?
I would say, besides their names on things, I would say personal satisfaction may have to do other things, and I'm not sure what the laws allow, and he probably knows more than I do. I don't know what their drawings and things that maybe they'd be able to participate in. And the other thing is that once this 501c gets started, there is a possibility of private companies you can use for advertising. Like one was given to me is Estes Industry. They make the model rockets, and they would love to advertise on a site like this to sell model rockets, and then they would give a percentage. I've got somebody back here first.
Are you familiar with the Mars Initiative? They started in 2012 on the same kind of crowdfunding idea that you're.
No, I don't.
MarsInitiative.org. They've been around for 5 years. I just looked at their balance. Looks like they just broke $10,000.
That's. I think that didn't go well. All I can tell you is that I'm going to dedicate my will to do it. And then whatever else I can do, I will do my part. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just following on from this, have you heard of the Martian Trust? Because I think they're trying to do a very similar thing.
Is that right? Yeah.
You might want to check them out.
Sir.
I'll be honest, that sounds really obsolete, because what he was talking about with Kickstarters, millennials like us, we're not investing in, or we're not giving the 501c3s for tax write-offs. We're doing stuff like Kickstarter because it's exciting and it's fun.
Okay, well, don't you think going to Mars is fun and exciting?
It is, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I have no problem giving money to Kickstarter at all. Like, I support a lot of them because it's just the setup that they have. It's a lot of fun, and you don't get any tax write-offs.
All I can say is I guess it's more or less a way, it's all in what you want out of life. You know, there are people here who are very enthusiastic about going to Mars in various ways.
Because what they're saying is that fund that has like $10,000, that's nothing. Kickstarter will get that in like a couple days.
Right. I agree with you. There are various ways of doing it, and we're looking into all different ways. Sir?
If you have the 501c3, you can also do the Kickstarter.
Absolutely.
Because they have the allowance for 501c3 organizations, and you can do the tax deductible contribution. You can give them a certificate saying they participated in getting mankind to Mars, as part of the introductory.
So, I mean, there are various avenues to think about.
There are ways to combine the marketing proposals with
Right.
something that is going to reach more young people.
Right. Sir?
So kind of just making an observation, we've got at least 2 in the back right there, the websites that are doing this. We've got Kickstarter, which already exists. We've got this new one right here. It seems like our focus should be trying to find a way to combine all these. Like it's clear that there's a lot of people out there that right now are spending some money on the idea of going to Mars, but they're spending in different pockets that aren't combined. We're all on the same team. What can we do to find a way to kind of get these multiple pathways of money?
All I think of is keep advertising.
I actually don't agree with that at all, because you need to have different groups that are pulling from different pools. And I think at the end of the day, you're right, we're on the same team, but I don't believe in pooling the money. However, we can definitely split up different things that we're doing.
Sure.
Even if we're not split.
Let's get one more question here, because I think we're running out of time.
Maybe we could chat
I
after.
think I might have something that addresses a lot of these problems altogether. Kickstarter is great because it allows you to take small donations, but there are 16 states now that allow you to do crowd investing, expecting a monetary return for your investment and not just the
Okay.
although you get feel good. If you were to set up something that was to, let's say, fund technologies that was going to have other commercial applications, and set up a
So it's at 2 different avenues. One is the donation part, and another one of commercial.
And so if somebody can say, I'm going to give you $100 and to be some carbon fiber production technique or something like that returns, $1 million.
As a matter of fact, the gentleman who just spoke the Mars University. I wanted to speak with him because exactly what you're talking about. He's trying to get some private thing going so that he can actually get people to do things and then sell them and actually make money privately so that he can then invest that money. So I want to speak to him after. Yes, sir.
We're interested in living forever. It seems to me that tax deductions can be taken away, as we all know now. That perhaps, one thing that would get me to contribute as an individual would be if my DNA could be deposited there, so that I would be related to all the future Martians and people who are going to use it.
That's something to think about.
Instead of my name, just take a little piece of my DNA.
Something to think about. Maybe put that on a blog, because we're going to have blogs where you can just write in, and so maybe you should put that on there. It's not that far-fetched anymore today. Thank you for coming. I think we got the next person coming.